This is Jess McDonald standing in for reviewer David Wildgoose. Memories can be painful. In Disco Elysium, a mesmerizing, hilarious, and at times harrowing narrative-heavy RPG, recollecting a memory can prove fatal. For an amnesiac alcoholic cop struggling with a new murder case with elusive details and the world's worst hangover, remembering the person he was offers a path to redemption for the person he might become. After all, memories that don't kill you make you stronger.
You really dropped the ball, Harry. 4.6 billion people, and you failed every single one of them.
Disco Elysium presents as an RPG in the mold of Baldur's Gate or Divinity Original Sin. Indeed, it opens with a nod to Planescape Torment, with a semi-naked figure lying on a cold, hard slab before slowly rising to his feet. Only the slab isn't in a mortuary, it's in a cheap motel room, and the figure wasn't recently dead, he's just still drunk. Very, very drunk. It proceeds with the traditional top-down view of the world, your party members traversing beautiful hand-painted 2D environments, pausing to inspect objects and talk to people. There are quests to initiate, experience to gain, levels to up, dialogue trees to climb, and skill checks to fail. Yet in all kinds of other ways, thematically and mechanically, Disco Elysium is very unlike other RPGs. On the one hand, it's a detective game. Played straight, there's a meticulous satisfaction in assuming the role of a by-the-book cop. You can grill suspects about their movements on the night of the murder and look for holes in their stories about what they saw. You can call into the police station or request that they retrieve further information about leads you've uncovered, and if there's anything your booze-frazzled brain has forgotten, your eternally patient partner Kim Kitsuragi is always there with a gentle reminder of the finer details of effective police work. Of course, you don't have to play it straight. Disco Elysium provides a staggering amount of options, letting you choose and roleplay the type of cop, indeed the type of person, your amnesiac detective is going to remember himself to be. As such, you're welcome to walk out of your hotel room with just one shoe on, and you're able to tell the manager you're not paying for the room, nor the damage you caused, and he can frankly go screw himself. In his impeccably dry way, Kim will suggest this is not exactly appropriate behavior, but he's also not going to stop you from reinventing yourself as a cocky superstar cop, a rude asshole cop, a wretched nihilistic cop, a bungling apologetic cop, a mortified repentant cop, or some tempered combination thereof. Even during what could be considered rote casework, Disco Elysium provides so much opportunity to express yourself. There's a scene in which you and Kim are conducting an autopsy. While Kim got his hands dirty, I opted for the paperwork. This scene, which should be aggressively dry, is instead wonderfully written, creative and entertaining, and threaded throughout is the satisfying accumulation of clues, the central mystery contracting and expanding as new information answers questions and asks further ones. But Disco Elysium is not just a commendable detective game. It is a deeply political game that tackles issues of ideology, privilege, racism, and class in a thoughtful and provocative fashion. The small seaside town you've been summoned to is in fact the neglected working-class district of Revachol, a city built to resolve history in the wake of a failed communist revolution that now sees it governed by a coalition of foreign nations. The murder you're investigating at first seems tied to a months-long labor dispute. Negotiations between union and corporate leaders are at a stalemate. Striking workers have shut down the harbour, scab labourers are picketing in the streets, and road transport in and out of town is at a standstill. More deeply ingrained are the painful memories of the wars that first beheaded the Revachol monarchy, and then quashed the revolution, and the lingering darkness of centuries-old racial resentments fueled by the economic anxieties of industrial change. It's a remarkable, nuanced circumstance. Tensions are high, violence feels inevitable, and the future of Revachol has never felt more uncertain.
I hope you pass out from it, you goddamn jellyfish! Men like you are the reason this nation is sinking!
The case you're working intersects with the political arguments of the town. You're given openings to sympathize with or reject various political views, and your character stats do in fact track how much of a communist, fascist, ultra-liberal, or moralist you are. There's a tongue-in-cheek approach here, as when you're given the option in favor of your preferred ideology, it's, without exception, an utterly extreme version of it. Moderate paths don't exist. There's no room for a public option. The communists are all about jumping straight to the eat the rich stage. Indeed, Disco Elysium isn't especially interested in the typical binary ideologies explored in most RPGs. It pokes fun at extremism and at the same time chides you for any attempt to retreat into non-committal centrism. And it's even less interested in trying to dodge politics. Instead, it wants you to focus on the dynamics of power that structure society, and the systemic changes required to repair the inequities of those relationships. This is a game with a specific, if complex, point of view, and it's not afraid to remind you of it even when it's leaving room for you to explore other ideas. Yet Disco Elysium isn't just a formidable game of politics and detective work. It also jettisons a bunch of standard tropes of RPG interaction and replaces them with new systems that delve deep into your character's psyche. There is no combat to speak of. There are certain encounters that play out like combat analogues, except you're not choosing to attack or defend. Instead, you're picking from a selection of actions and lines of dialogue, where successes or failures depend on the skills you prioritized and the luck of the dice. During character creation, you cannot alter the physical appearance of your nameless cop. You can, however, drop points into a bunch of entertainingly unusual and evocative skills. Disco Elysium's skill system is refreshingly original. The entire fascinating suite it posits serves as a captivating exploration to your character's inner life, and echoes his journey of self-rediscovery. Skill checks are being rolled all the time to see if there's something you should know. It could be as simple as checking whether your perception means you notice a particular object. Maybe you see or hear a word you don't recognize and your encyclopedia skill interrupts to provide a definition. You're often able to conduct conversations with your skills, digging for more information or telling them to pipe down. A little chorus in your head filling the gaps and prodding you into action. These competing, often uncalled for voices add up to a remarkably successful simulation of how the mind works. Skills intrude during conversations with other characters too. Sometimes your skills offer conflicting approaches. Drama might be urging you to make a big scene, but composure is pushing back, coolly arguing for restraint. Much of the unpleasant things you can say are the result of a failed skill check. It can feel weird to have your character do something you didn't quite intend, or have your dialogue choices restricted to 3 equally offensive alternatives, but there's something pleasingly authentic in the way things don't always go according to plan. Learning to read Disco Elysium through what can initially feel like a mad jumble of competing voices is the essential first step of attuning yourself to the type of experience it wants to deliver. This is a game with, let's be honest, an absolute ton of words to read. Literally everything you do, save walking from one place to another, is conveyed and accomplished through text. And what beautiful, bonkers, bold words they are. Disco Elysium is easily one of the best written games I've ever played. There's a swagger and a confidence here that's rarely seen. There's a masterful ability to transition from drama and intrigue to absurdist comedy and pointed political commentary in the space of a few sentences. One moment you're elbow deep in the grim details of police procedure, the next you're contemplating some metaphysical wonder. Later, some hilariously grotesque joke is followed by a spell of genuinely moving emotional vulnerability. It might sound all over the shop, but it works because it rings true to the fascinating, multifaceted central character. Your nameless cop can be charming, offensive, understandably confused, brimming with completely unearned optimism, flustered, unguarded, or simply sick of everything he's had to endure. Your skill selections and dialogue choices nudge him in these directions, but of course the reality is that he's always all of them. The man whose, quote, armpits are lakes, a scythe of booze preceding him, as he's first introduced, is the same man who licks congealed rum off the counter of a bar, is the same man who, locked in a tender embrace with a strange woman, vows to spread peaceful communist revolution one hug at a time, is the same man who passes the time sitting on a playground swing, whistling a tune with his detective partner. A writhing mass of contradictory impulses and behavior, as human as the rest of us. Disco Elysium is a mad, sprawling detective story where the real case you've got to crack isn't who killed the man strung up on a tree in the middle of town, though that in itself, replete with dozens of unexpected yet intertwined mysteries and wild excursions into the ridiculous, is engrossing enough to sustain the game. Rather, it's an investigation of ideas, of the way we think, of power and privilege, and of how all of us are shaped with varying degrees of autonomy by the society in which we find ourselves.
But now, you are all alone. None of this matters. No, none of this matters at all.